Can you imagine what the widow and her sons were saying after they saw this? They got one little flask of oil and they go, okay, got to pour it in all these. I guess maybe a little bit. Oops, I poured it all in there. Now what? Oh, wait, no, I didn't pour it all in there. Wow. And they get it all filled and they realize what's going on. They realize God's provision. You imagine the strengthening of their faith at that point in time? Wow, God really provides. God really speaks through this prophet. God really knows about me and my need. Now that's faith generating, isn't it? So the next time that widow comes to a place in her life of difficulty, need of provision, need of something from the Lord, you think she's going to be, well, I don't know if God can do this or not. No, she's going to be going, I know God provided for me miraculously there. I don't know how he's going to do it this time, but I know he's going to do it. I know I can have faith in my God. Let's read on. 2 Kings chapter 4, verse 8. Now it happened one day that Elisha went to Shunammon, not Shunammon Center, but this is a city up in northern Galilee, where there was a notable woman, and she persuaded him to eat some food. And so it was, as often as he passed by, he would turn in there and eat some food. And she said to her husband, look, now I know that this is a holy man of God who passes by regularly. Let's make a small upper room for him on the wall, and let us put a bed there for him, and a table, and a chair, and a lampstand. So it will be whenever he comes to us, he can turn in here. He can stay here. We'll give him his own little room here. So whenever he's coming by, he's got a little apartment to stay. And it happened one day that she came there, and he turned into the upper room and lay down there. And then he said to Gehazi, his servant, call this Shunammite woman. And when he called her, she stood before him. And he said to her, say now to her, look, you have been concerned for us with all this care. What can I do for you? Do you want me to speak on your behalf to the king or to the commander of the army? And she said, I dwell here among my own people. Basically, I've got everything I need. I'm here. I'm among my own people. I'm not like that other widow I heard about with the oil, who's kind of needed something. I'm okay. I'm okay. So he said, well, what then is to be done for her? So his servant answered, actually, she has no son, and her husband is old. So he said to her, call her. And when he had called her, she stood in the doorway, and he said, about this time next year you shall embrace a son. And she said, no, my lord, man of God, don't lie to your maidservant. Don't kid me. Don't just tell me stuff like this, unless it's really true. Don't just tell me this. But the woman conceived and bore a son when the appointed time had come, of which Elisha had told her. The child grew, and it happened one day he went out to his father, to the reapers, out in the fields, and he said to his father, my head, my head hurts, my head hurts. So he said to his servant, carry him into his mother. And when he had taken him in and brought him into his mother, he sat on her knees till noon, and then he died. And she went up and laid him on the bed of the man of God, shut the door upon him, and went out. And then she called to her husband and said, please, send me one of the young men and one of the donkeys, that I may run to the man of God and come back. And he said, why are you going to him today? It's not Sunday, it's not the new moon, it's not the Sabbath. And she said, it's okay, or it is well. It's okay. Then she saddled the donkey, said to her servant, drive, go forward, don't slacken the pace, unless I tell you to. So she departed and went to the man of God at Mount Carmel. And so it was when the man of God saw her afar off that he said to his servant, look, the Shunammite woman. Go, run down and meet her and say to her, is it well with you? Is it well with your husband? Is it well with your child? And she answered, it's well. It's okay. Now when she came to the man of God at the hill, she caught him by the feet, and his servant came near to push her away. But the man of God said, let her alone, for her soul is in deep distress, and the Lord has hidden it from me, and has not told me. So she said, did I ask a son of my Lord? Did I not say, don't deceive me? Then he said to his servant, get yourself ready. Take my staff in your hand. Be on your way. If you meet anyone, don't greet them. If anyone greets you, don't answer him. But lay my staff on the face of the child. And the mother of the child said, as the Lord lives and as your soul lives, I will not leave you. So he arose and followed her. Now the servant went on ahead of them and laid the staff on the face of the child, but there was neither voice nor hearing. Therefore he went back to meet him and told him, saying, the child's not awakened. And when Elisha came into the house, there was the child lying dead on his bed. He went in, therefore, shut the door behind the two of them, and prayed to the Lord. And he went up and lay on the child, and put his mouth on his mouth, his eyes on his eyes, his hands on his hands. And he stretched himself out on the child, and the flesh of the child became warm. He returned, walked back and forth in the house, and again went up and stretched himself out on him. And then the child sneezed 7 times, and the child opened his eyes. And he called his servant and said, "Call the Shunammite woman." So he called her. And when she came in to him, he said, "Pick up your son." So she went in, fell at his feet, bowed to the ground, and she picked up her son and went out. Wow. Can you imagine this scene? Can you imagine this woman who and her husband, who are obviously well-to-do and able to help out this man of God, and they give him this little apartment. And he says, "What can I do back for you?" "Nothing. I'm okay." And just in honesty, they're not expecting anything. They're just serving the Lord and serving the servant of the Lord, just, to do that. Not expecting anything. And he says, "Well, Lord's going to give you a son. Next year, you'll have a son when I come by." Because don't fool me. This is a very important thing in those days. For a woman to be childless was, for some, considered a curse. And a son, especially to have a son, that was so important in those days. And so it happens. What a miracle. Can you imagine how blessed they must have been, how much they were enjoying this kid. And then this kid comes out, and it appears that he had some kind of brain aneurysm. Just an immediate, sudden onset of a headache. So much so that his dad goes, "Hey, get this kid into his mom. Find out what's going on." And she lays him on her lap all morning, and he dies in her arms. And look at the faith of this woman. She doesn't start crying out. She doesn't start screaming at God. She doesn't go tell her servant, "Go get my husband and go tell him to kill that Elisha. I knew something bad was going to happen." But instead, she takes the child and puts him up on Elisha's bed. And then goes and runs to get Elisha and doesn't tell her husband what's going on. Her faith was such that she was saying, "I know the man of God spoke to me and I was able to conceive. I know that God will do something else." And in those days, there wasn't direct communication between just anybody and God. It's not like today we would say, "Why didn't she pray to God? Why didn't she call out to God immediately?" She saw the man of God as her communication link to God, so that's where she went. She was acting in faith. And so she goes, and she even tells the servant, it's okay. Everything's all right. Just let me see Elisha. Just let me see Elisha. Once again, this whole thing is not to put on a show of faith, but this is to let God's hand be demonstrated. She didn't tell anyone. Elisha, when he got there, he goes up and closes the door so nobody can see what's going on. Interesting, isn't it? And then just kind of lays down on the kid, and he begins to get warm. The coldness of death isn't on him anymore, but he's not rising up. And Elisha gets up and starts pacing in the room and praying. I mean, this must have been so intense. And then lays down upon him again. And then he sneezes, and he comes back to life. Wow. For both the woman and Elisha, this was not a public display, but this was a private seeking of God's help. Sometimes our faith in action is demonstrated to others. But the purpose of our faith is not to impress others. The purpose of our faith, the exercise of our faith, is not to show others how much faith we have, how much holier we are than anybody else. Our faith is not a show for others to see it. It's not. And yet in today's world, that's what it's become. Faith, thanks to so many in the blab it and grab it end of Christianity, in the showmanship on TV or in big conferences. Faith has become this thing, it's become this competition. "Well, I have more faith than you, look at what I can do." That's not faith, that's pride. And Habakkuk told us that pride's the opposite of faith. No. Faith means humility. Faith means being in subservience and servanthood of the Lord. That's what faith is.